This commission results from the conduct of a former legal practitioner and her relationship with Victoria Police.
To police, she was known as Informer 3838.
This is probably the single biggest scandal to hit the Australian justice system in history.
She purported to act as counsel for clients charged with criminal offences whilst simultaneously informing on those clients to police.
For years, the public only knew her as Lawyer X, as Victoria Police fought to keep her identity secret. Now, Nicola Gobbo is the most infamous lawyer in Australia.
I don't think that there has ever been a case that I've heard of in the Western world that has all of the features that this case has, where at every single layer of the system it's been corrupted so egregiously by people so high up in the Victoria Police hierarchy. It's unprecedented.
This is a tale of cops, criminals, murder and betrayal that's become the biggest crisis ever faced by the Australian justice system. In the Victorian courts, Nicola Gobbo was building a career as an effective, at times fearsome, defence barrister. Her clients were a who's who of the criminal underworld. But Gobbo had a dirty secret. She was also a registered police informer and was passing information about her clients to police.
When she walked in the door and said, "I want to be an informer," they should have turned around and said, "Not possible, thanks very much."
Do you think you got enough now?
Who would ever have thought a formidable defence barrister is going to turn rogue and start using her clients' information and give it to the police? You never think that on a month of Sundays.
Tonight on Four Corners, how the crisis known as the Lawyer X scandal has undermined trust in the criminal justice system and raised serious questions about the conduct of Victoria Police.
There's been another payback gangland killing in Melbourne.
For Melbourne homicide detectives like Charlie Bazina, the late 1990s and early 2000s were a wild ride. The underworld was tearing itself apart.
It's clear the man has been ambushed and executed.
Two men wearing balaclavas. There was some sort of confrontation inside. There were shots fired.
From the working class streets of Sunshine
Here's a bang, bang, bang.
to the gentrifying cafes of Carlton and Brunswick, the bodies were piling up.
We heard 3, maybe 4 shots, pretty rapid fire, so it sounded like a semi-automatic or automatic gun.
Look, in those days, it was something we'd never been exposed to in all the years that I was a police officer. Carl Williams being shot by Jason and Mark Moran and the likes, and then it escalated from that point. And again, it's like what they see in movies, in American movies, the turf war.
Two of Melbourne's most notorious crime gangs, the Williams family and the Carlton crew, began a bloody fight for control of the city's lucrative drug trade. It would become known simply as the Gangland War.
Whilst we had many years ago in the 60s and 70s the murders in the Victoria market and that mafia, alleged mafia involvement, here we had an era where we were getting underworld figures being murdered at an alarming rate.
Can you describe what it was like here in Melbourne in those years?
Oh, Chicago in the 30s, it was totally lawless, and the media were selling plenty of newspapers based on the stories of the latest infraction by Victorian criminals. It was an epidemic of murder and crime going on that Victoria Police were legitimately very concerned about, and the citizens of Melbourne were obviously very concerned about.
One of the criminals on the rise was drug dealer Carl Williams. It was his shooting in 1999 that ramped up the violence.
They say it happening over money, that I was shot, everything like that. As I said, I don't know anything, who I was shot by, anything, why I was shot.
You don't know who shot you?
No, I don't know who shot me.
Well, you have your eyes shut at the time, or what?
Yeah, well, I've got no idea really who shot me. It's, you know,
and it's nothing to do with you that both of those two men are dead now?
No, it's nothing to do with me at all.
The baby-faced mobster who began dealing on the fringe of the drug scene was now well on the way to becoming the leader of a multi-million-dollar drug empire, and he was hell-bent on revenge.
The violence that marks payback in the underworld took a savage turn during the weekend when an infamous Melbourne crime figure was shot dead in front of his children.
The real turning point was definitely the murders of Jason Moran and Pasquale Barbaro at the footy clinic. Because previously people were murdered in their driveways, in their cars, at night, and now you have got normal suburban families going to an Auskick clinic and seeing two people brutally murdered in front of their own children.
Crooks don't do things like that. They have their own unwritten law. So this went outside the bounds of what career seasoned criminals would do themselves and what was acceptable at all within our community. So it was outside those two realms significantly. So this was a major, major turning point in the underworld killings.
Over the next few years, the gangland violence would thrust the criminals, the state's top cops, and a handful of defence lawyers into the public spotlight. This was a career-making moment. Two of the most prominent were young, female and flamboyant. One was Nicola Gobbo, who would later become Carl Williams' lawyer.
And if you appeared before Nicola Gobbo, you knew you were in for a run in that witness box. She was no slouch. She knew her business very, very well. She knew police procedures. And you knew you were in for a run for your money.
Her uncle was a Supreme Court judge before becoming Governor of Victoria. He was a Rhodes Scholar. He got degrees from Oxford. Her sister is a member of the Victorian Bar. Cousin is a member of the Victorian Bar. It's a large legal family.
What does the name Gobbo mean here in legal circles?
It did mean everything in legal circles. It was a ticket to anywhere. Unfortunately, now it is going to be remembered for a lot more than what it did stand for.
With a name like Gobbo, she would have had a very promising career ahead of her, wouldn't she?
Oh, without question, there'd be a stepping stone straight onto the bench.
The other colourful young defence lawyer who represented well-known underworld figures at the time was Zara Gard-Wilson.
I can recall sort of that period. It was almost a gangland killing every couple of weeks.
In the early 2000s, Nicola Gobbo's career was on a fast track. But her approach was anything but traditional.
All criminal lawyers will end up doing a high-profile case in their career. They'll all end up getting chased down the street by camera crews in relation to at least one client. But the people she represented, she seemed to be attracted to the people who would attract the most attention, and she did so both in a personal and professional capacity.
As the gangland figures rolled up to court, Nicola Gobbo was often at their side, and when the courts closed, she was at the celebrations and the family dinners, blurring the line between professional and personal.
When you see that famous picture of Nicola Gobbo at the Crown Casino with Williams, arm in arm, and that type of stuff, you sort of reel back as an investigator and say, well, hang on a minute, is this appropriate for a defence barrister to be that? Her role is to protect people in relation to a defence barrister, but not to be seen socialising with these people.
The conduct alarmed many of her colleagues. It was unusual, and given the times, potentially dangerous. Criminal lawyer Ruth Parker has also acted for a number of underworld figures.
There was no self-preservation to begin with. When you are socialising with people who you understand are under investigation for a series of murders, for commercial quantity drug trafficking, I mean, why are you giving speeches at Dakota Williams' christening? Why are you going to dinner with your clients? The danger she put herself in was that she became part of the gang.
I've been asked to make a special...
There's a very strict demarcation. You don't socialise with your clients. We're working in the criminal jurisdiction. You act professionally, you defend them vigorously, but what you don't do is you don't cross that line and you don't socialise with people. It's dangerous, particularly in that period from 1999 to 2005, 30-odd people had been killed. It's dangerous, all right. And when you nail your colours to the mast in the way that she did, she was inviting trouble.
But the lawyers didn't know the half of it. For the last 8 months, a royal commission in Melbourne has laid out the scale of her dangerous double game. The commission has heard it began back in the early 90s, when she was still at law school.
Am I right in saying then that at the time you were registering Nicola Gobbo as an informer, you knew, one, she was a law student?
Yep.
At the bottom it says you also were aware, I'm asking you, that she was intending to become a solicitor. Agree?
That's correct. Yep.
Right. Do you therefore agree that a decision was made by someone, be it you or otherwise, that she potentially could be a good asset?
Yes, otherwise we wouldn't have bothered registering her.
It appears to have started in university days, that this was her personality coming out of really wanting to play the whole field.
The Royal Commission has heard that Nicola Gobbo's first contact with the drug squad was when they raided this house in Carlton in 1993. The first person Gobbo informed on was her flatmate and boyfriend at the time, who was a drug dealer.
Going back to the search on the 3rd of September 93, as I understand it, you also were aware by then she was providing at least some intelligence on it, at the very least by saying the drugs are in the vent and they're his.
Correct.
The boyfriend she was living with was given an 8-month suspended jail sentence. Nicola Gobbo was given a 12-month good behaviour bond and no conviction. Police identified her as a human source worth cultivating.
And you agree it was you who was involved in recruiting her?
But I've never disputed that, yes.
And I'm
That's
asking,
the registration, yes.
I'm not criticising. So when... It must have been fairly unique to be in the position of recruiting someone as an informant who is all of those factors. Someone who's a law student, intending to practice the law, related to someone within the law, and also a partner of a known criminal.
And your question being, I'm sorry?
From the time she was first recruited as an informer, some police were expressing concern about her. She was described as a loose cannon and criticised for making her own arrangements and not liaising with investigators.
Is it your understanding that the detective recalls having concerns that led him to the view that she shouldn't be registered as an informer? One of the reasons was that she was a solicitor.
Yes, that's right.
Also that she was too overt in her desire to provide information to police.
That's correct.
That her relationships with some officers was inappropriate.
That's correct.
Despite the concerns about her character, she was used on and off as an informer throughout the 90s, before being deregistered as an informer in 2000. By the early 2000s, Nicola Gobbo was a barrister representing many of the key underworld figures, including the drug kingpin Tony Mockbell. Melbourne's gangland war was in full swing, and the number of dead was growing.
It was in the media, it was political, and nearly every day you were reading write-ups about somebody getting murdered or some violent crimes occurring.
Nicola Gobbo was also out drinking with police at hotels like O'Connell's and talking unofficially with detectives.
I think what has come out from the Royal Commission is it wasn't as much that she loved it, she needed it. There was something deeply unwell about her need for validation and her need to be constantly surrounded by risky people.
I have to say, though, our experience in the past is...
In 2003, the young, confident new Assistant Commissioner Simon Overland became the public face of Victoria Police efforts to rein in the violence. As the gangland hits continued, he was often at the scene, just in front of the cameras.
All available resources will be brought onto this job. We will leave no stone unturned to find the people responsible for this latest murder.
Overland was instrumental in establishing the special task force called Piranha.
Early this morning, the Piranha Task Force, which is investigating more than 20 underworld murders in Melbourne, took over the case.
They were specifically designed, and the unit was put together to investigate gangland murders. And it was a political decision to put together what was a specialist task force, the elite of the elite, and they became a law enforcement superpower.
Assistant Commissioner Simon Overland and the current Commissioner Graham Ashton, who was then at the Office of Police Integrity, were brought in from the AFP. They had a different approach to policing that rubbed badly with the old guard.
These are federal police officers. They don't have the experience of cold-faced policing. They don't, because federal policing is so different from state policing. Yet here they are calling the shots.
Police were desperate to bring the gangland killings to an end. In September 2005, Victoria Police made the astonishing decision to register Nicola Gobbo as an informer once again. She would become the police secret weapon in the underworld war.
I would say that there were certain people in the administration of Victoria Police at a very high level whose egos and ambition and the publicity surrounding it were all too eager to have Nicola Gobbo as an informer and to solve these types of crimes.
It was world news that the so-called, one of the safest places in the world were having these massive hits on a regular basis. And I think the police view and the feeling that we were getting as an opposition is that they were going to do whatever it took to get it done. And as it's turned out, the courts will determine that they have probably overstepped the mark, and there will be consequences as a result of that.
The decision to use her would have gone a long way up the tree. I don't know how far, but whoever made the decision to use Nicola Gobbo as an informer, it was a very naive decision. And a lot of the operational members, and members that I've spoken to, and retired members, just can't believe the Victoria Police did that at that time.
On the 8th of September 2005, did you attend a meeting with Detective Acting Superintendent Hill, Detective Inspector White, Detective Sergeant Mansell and members of the SDU?
Yes.
And there was a decision made on that day for the SDU to meet with Ms Gobbo to assess her suitability, is that right?
Yes.
Was there any discussion at that meeting about the ethical implications of making a lawyer a police agent, effectively?
I don't remember.
There appears not to be a case anywhere around the world where this has occurred before, which goes to show the significance of it. No one's been willing to cross that line other than Victoria Police.
You've stopped the shootings. People are locked up on remand awaiting trial. To go the next step and recruit a criminal defence lawyer to ensure that they are convicted for the rest of their lives or for decades, that's not pressure. That's a conspiracy to pervert the course of justice.
Probably they would say at the time the ends justify the means, but that's hardly an excuse and hardly justifies it, and can never ever justify what's occurred.
One of those she turned on was her client, the drug baron Tony Mockbell. Gobbo had grown fearful of Mockbell, who had begun threatening her. She later said he was one of the main reasons she agreed to become an informer, to get him off her back.
So where do we start?
Well, I guess you can start.
As this recording of Gobbo and her handlers reveals, she was willing to give police everything she knew.
Well, like I say, they tell me everything you know about Tony Mockbell. How have we got?
How many weeks do you book the room for?
Well, to be quite honest, if you want to go down that track, we will take as long as it takes.
She was effectively dealing up her clients on a platter to the prosecuting authorities when they had every expectation that she would be looking after them. She simply betrayed them.
The fact that it went for so long and went undetected for so long, and that she was capable of putting on the Jekyll and Hyde face throughout this on a daily basis is quite extraordinary.
Another client of Nicola Gobbo's was this man, Terry Hodson. a minor player in the Melbourne drug scene, but a valuable informer for Victoria Police. His police overseer was Drug Squad Detective Paul Dale. It was Gobbo's dealings with these two men, Hodson and Dale, that would eventually lead to her undoing. She became enmeshed in one of the most intriguing crimes of the Gangland War. In 2003, a drug house in Melbourne controlled by the drug kingpin Tony Mockbell was broken into. A stash of drugs was stolen. The break-in was conducted by Hodson and Detective Dave Michel, Hodson's police handler and a member of Paul Dale's drug squad.
Ultimately, Dave Michel is arrested by a police dog handler. Terry Hodson's arrested. Terry Hodson then makes a statement that implicates Paul Dale of being part and parcel of the potential burglary at that place, which is completely denied by Paul Dale.
Dale's alibi was that he was in Bendigo on the night of the robbery. Rob Starry was Terry Hodson's lawyer.
We became involved with Terry Hodson just prior to his committal hearing or his preliminary hearing, where we brokered a deal where he would plead guilty to burglary and theft committed in the company of two other police officers, and then he would then give evidence against those police officers, including Paul Dale. We'd come to an agreement with the prosecution that he would not serve a term of imprisonment.
Just before it was heard, Rob Starry was told he was off the case and that Terry Hodson would be represented by Nicola Gobbo.
I was completely surprised. We had a good relationship with Terry and his wife Christine and their children, and so there was a good rapport with them. We'd come to a good arrangement for him, and so we were completely blown away by the fact that he'd sought to instruct other people.
And now you know what you know. What happened?
Well, it appears that Nicola Gobbo maintained contact with him, and then she decided, or arrangements were made for her to appear. Now, we didn't know, obviously, that she was in a relationship with Paul Dale, one of the accused, and we didn't know that she was conveying information to him.
So Nicola Gobbo was representing the Hodsons, at the same time getting information from Paul Dale, who they were going to testify against.
Yes, and she was conveying information to Paul Dale.
She asked to see my dad, from what I can gather, and I think she did represent my brother because of my brother knowing Tony Mockbell and all that.
Mandy Hodson is one of Terry Hodson's 3 children.
I've never liked her. I didn't meet her personally at first, but I was the one who nicknamed her Sharon 20 Stone because of the outfits when she was a bit bigger that she used to wear. Reminded me of Sharon Stone in Basic Instinct.
Mandy Hodson says her father knew his days were numbered.
He used to walk around and say he was a dead man walking. I knew the extent of it, but I didn't ever think I would come and find them murdered.
On the 15th of May 2004, Terry Hodson and his wife Christine were murdered as they watched television at home. Charlie Bazina was the investigating detective.
I'm an on-call team. I'll get called out to the scene, and that's what I'm confronted with. Christine and Terry's body in the back room, being shot to the back of the head. No sign of forced entry. And then I just start doing the investigation and learning things. Why would someone want to kill this person? Here we have a police informer. Crooks don't like police informers. So I had a myriad of different people that wanted Terry dead.
I think that it was someone dressed or impersonating a police officer, because then that would have made sense as to why he didn't have his gun next to him. He might have said to my mum, or watching on his TV, he might have said, "Oh, that's the police. You put the gun away and I'll go and let them in."
And of course the allegation against Paul Dale was that He contracted Carl Williams to kill Hodson. Had no idea, obviously, that that was happening. And so on the day that Terry Hodson was killed, police rang me and I was completely shocked and unnerved by what happened.
Williams later told police Paul Dale had asked him to arrange the hit on Terry Hodson for $150,000. Williams also said it was Nicola Gobbo who gave him Dale's phone number. Unknown to Charlie Bazina, Police Command had their own parallel operation involving Gobbo underway.
In the meantime, I learned that Overland and others are running Gobbo behind my back in relation to the Hodson investigation and other things, as we now know, without any knowledge of me. I'm not trusted in that particular thing. Why? I don't know. That's something you'd have to ask him. I've just gone on me where way. You know what? I'm focused on getting the killers or killer for the Hodson people, whilst they're doing their own little thing behind my back.
At this time, the use of Gobbo as an informer was kept close. But in the criminal and legal world, some started suspecting something wasn't quite right.
The suspicions were around 2006, and this is when a number of gangland people had rolled and become prosecution witnesses, and there was clearly a crossover in relation to her representation, potentially of them and current clients, and the continuation of her representing those current clients.
One of Gobbo's biggest clients also made it clear he knew what she was up to.
You had Carl Williams come out and say to people, Nicola Gobbo is a dog. She is informing. What did anyone do with that? Nothing. And I think he was poo-pooed and said, well, mate, you know, you're a criminal, we don't accept what you say, but it was coming from other sources. But everyone remained mute on it.
Complaints were made by Carl Williams to the Ethics Committee and the Bar Committee and various other parties that, hey, there appears to be a conflict of interest here, I'd like this stopped, and it just went nowhere.
Why is that, do you think?
It's unbelievable. It's just not plausible that Victoria Police would have the gall to register a barrister on her own clients.
The implications of what she was doing wasn't lost on Nicola Gobbo herself. Recordings revealed at the Royal Commission show this time she was concerned police weren't doing enough to protect her anonymity.
I've chucked ethics out the window, I've chucked legal professional privilege out the window, I've chucked my career out the window if any of this ever came out. Forget about it, I wouldn't even be covered by insurance. I would be so fucked it's not funny.
No one could have any doubt how dangerous this was. Gobbo herself received a number of threatening text messages. Keep your mouth shut, slut, fucking dog. You need to keep that informing dog mouth shut, slut. Despite the growing concerns about her safety, Victoria Police then made the extraordinary decision to have Gobbo wear a wire to record a conversation with Paul Dale.
They were certainly keen to see if, in fact, Paul Dale was involved in the Hodson killings. What better way to do it with someone that Dale is sleeping with, and a defence barrister? Had Paul Dale found that she's wearing a wire, well, goodness knows, it would have been, you know, the outcome would have been, I suppose, not good in that regard. So to make that decision, significant.
Police officer said to me, senior police officer said to me that he thought that the way it was being handled had overstepped the mark, and that would lead to a Royal Commission, and of course he turned out to be very right.
Did he say specifically that she was informing for them?
He said that she was playing both sides.
After recording a conversation with Dale, Gobbo initially agreed to be a witness against him. The Royal Commission has heard that the police steering committee overseeing the Hodson murders ignored warnings that this could put her at grave risk. The current Chief Commissioner, Graham Ashton, and the former Assistant Commissioner, Simon Overland, were on that steering committee.
The number one rule with any informer is anonymity. That's the number one thing you do, and Any serving policeman at the present time would tell you that. And to even consider using them as a witness is unheard of. And once again, I will say that whoever made that decision was extremely naive, and it showed a complete lack of operational experience.
I'm totally innocent of the murder of Christine and Terence Hodson.
Paul Dale was once a detective sergeant in the drug squad. He's now accused of organising one of Victoria's most notorious murders.
Paul Dale was arrested for the murder of the Hodsons in February 2009. By now, Nicola Gobbo's relationship with police was spiralling out of control. She'd been deregistered as an informer. Gobbo refused to testify against Dale. She went public with an attack on police and a dramatic demand for compensation.
Having had the courage and strength to agree to become a witness for Victoria Police, I was required to give up my home, my security, my sense of life as I knew it. I was assured by Mr. Overland that I would be compensated and that I would be left no worse off. I have become seriously ill as a result of the way in which I was forced to live during this period of time, and my health has deteriorated as a result of constant stress and uncertainty. I remain in fear for my life since agreeing to give evidence for Victoria Police. It is unfortunate that I was left with no alternative but to issue proceedings and to seek justice.
While Nicola Gobbo was pleading her case publicly, the case against Paul Dale sensationally collapsed with the murder of Carl Williams in Barwon Prison. The charges against Dale over the Hodson murders were dropped.
Now, Mr. Dale,
At the Royal Commission, Paul Dale claimed he was set up by Victoria Police.
I truly believe they've committed a criminal offence.
Yeah.
Perverted the course of justice.
I understand that.
They used her against me, then they tried to use her as a witness against me in a criminal matter, and it was an absolute debacle what went on at court through that period while they were trying to protect what they'd done. 8 months in solitary confinement because of a tape recording of a criminal barrister that I sought for legal advice. And now we see the whole can of worms opened up about what else she did for all of her clients, against her clients, on behalf of Victoria Police.
In August 2010, Victoria Police agreed to a settlement with Nicola Gobbo, reported to be nearly $3 million. While Gobbo had now outed herself as a witness, the fact that she was also a police informer was still secret.
This was the story that Victoria Police didn't want Australians to read about. They didn't want them to know about it. They'd kept it secret for the better part of 15 years. I reckon they probably thought they'd gotten away with it.
The information provided by Nicola Gobbo helped lock up some of the state's biggest criminals. But the ethical and legal questions about using a barrister as a police informer would continue to dog Victoria Police. 2 secret reviews into that decision would deliver critical assessments, and inevitably, the story began to leak.
Anthony Dowsley, our investigative reporter, rang me and he said 4 words: "I've got a story." I knew they wouldn't like it. I fundamentally underestimated how much they wouldn't like it, though. And in the end, the fact that we didn't name her in that initial report and we came up with a pseudonym, Lawyer X, they didn't back off.
The now Chief Commissioner Graham Ashton was determined to stop her identity becoming public knowledge. Police were granted multiple suppression orders and injunctions to prevent identifying her in any way.
This was unprecedented. We were dragged into court 28 times over that 5-year period by Victoria Police and the Victorian Government Solicitor's Office. And on each occasion, we were threatened with prosecution, conviction, fines. Very quickly after we published that initial story, we were also injuncted and suppressed from even calling her Lawyer X.
In another stunning move, the Director of Public Prosecutions declared an intention to notify a number of Gobbo's clients that she had been a police informer. The response from police was to try to stop it. They challenged the DPP all the way to the High Court.
The case wended its way through the Supreme Court of Victoria. It then went to the Court of Appeal of Victoria, it then went to the High Court. Each party was represented by senior counsel and solicitors and junior counsel, and huge amounts of public money effectively was expended as a result of the actions of the Chief Commissioner.
The High Court endorsed the decisions of the Victorian courts, allowing the DPP to disclose the information. The High Court ruling described the decision to recruit Gobbo as reprehensible conduct that debased fundamental premises of the criminal justice system.
It was a scathing indictment of her conduct and in particular of the conduct of Victoria Police, which they say sanctioned and countenanced it, and they say that Victoria Police effectively countenanced the breach by every sworn police officer in Victoria of their oath of office.
Whilst you might have senior police officers who said, oh yes, I wasn't very comfortable about it, they still allowed people to be convicted with tainted evidence and spend years in prison and did nothing.
For years, Victoria Police fought to keep Nicola Gobbo's identity secret, and it seems even here at the Royal Commission they're reluctant to be fully transparent. Since the hearings began, they've been accused of frustrating the proceedings and withholding information. At one point, the Commissioner was even moved to warn police they faced prosecution for withholding documents requested by the inquiry.
Could I suggest that you and those instructing you remind your clients of this notice to produce, of their obligations under it, which are ongoing, that it's an offence not to comply with it, and that an agency of the Crown can, under the Inquiries Act, be charged with the commission of an offence. Thank you.
Despite being asked repeatedly by the Commission, Victoria Police have been reluctant to produce documents and witness statements.
Documents have been dribbled forth to the Commission, always late and not with adequate time for those affected to cross-examine on them. There's obviously been a concerted attempt to stymie the Commission as much as has been possible.
There's a tendency here to delay, to obfuscate, to hope that this is all going to go away somehow. If the most well-resourced department of the Victorian government is finding it this difficult, then there really are only two explanations. Either people are just not doing their jobs, or this is intentional.
It is extraordinary. The Commission is still being provided with documents that were requested months ago. There's accused out there that still haven't received disclosure in relation to these matters.
Gobbo herself has said that a total of 386 people were arrested and charged based upon information she provided to police. The Office of Public Prosecutions has written to 31 convicted criminals to let them know their cases may have been tainted.
Were men wrongly convicted or convicted on tainted evidence? Who did it? Who ordered it? And what's going to happen to those police officers who were involved? Make no mistake, there are some really bad men who could get out of jail because of the actions of Victoria Police and Nicola Gobbo.
How does it play out from here?
A very, very slow process of unwinding every single one of those cases and determining what really has gone on and what ought to happen in the future.
The unethical use of Nicola Gobbo as an informer has already led to the release of one of the convicted gangland figures. Farouk Orman was convicted of murder and spent more than a decade in jail. His lawyer is Ruth Parker.
What happened was that a witness gave evidence against him, which we now know was created with the assistance of Nicola Gobbo.
In Orman's case, Gobbo's assistance to police went well beyond just securing convictions.
And so on the day that she heard that he'd been arrested, the same day he contacted her, the same day she was contacting the main witness against him, she contacted her handlers and said, he needs to be surrounded by people at all times, and he's obsessive compulsive in terms of cleanliness. If you keep him isolated in messy conditions, he'll break.
Farouk Orman was kept in solitary confinement for 3 years.
18 months into his 3-year stint in solitary confinement, she reports back to her handlers that piranha tactics are working. He's at his lowest that he's ever been. It's unknown whether he will roll, but obviously she's staying on top of the situation.
Rob Karam is another underworld figure who will be appealing. He was convicted of drug trafficking and sentenced to 37 years in jail. His lawyer is Zara Gard-Wilson.
When we first filed for Mr Cram in 2015, counsel who appeared for the Chief Commissioner said that our appeal was a delusional fantasy and nothing more. The mere fact that she was a registered police informer is a delusional fantasy. So that's the starting mark that we started with.
The drug baron Tony Mockbell, currently serving 30 years, will also be appealing. His lawyer has accused Victoria Police of criminal behaviour.
This is not just a case of impropriety. There is criminal conduct here, and that involves aiding and abetting Gobbo in perverting the course of justice. This is a situation that is of their own making. Nothing like this has ever occurred, to my knowledge.
Ruth Parker also believes those police commanders who sanctioned the decision to recruit Gobbo have committed criminal offences.
They need to take full responsibility, but that can only happen when the people whose personal interests are divided from the interests of the organisation. I mean, one thing that has always astonished me is how you can have an organisation run by a person such as Graham Ashton in circumstances where he is well and truly in the spotlight, potentially having committed criminal offences himself.
So it is pretty clear in your mind that the actions of Ashton and Overland and other senior police officers is corrupt?
Yes. Anybody who thinks that registering a criminal defence barrister as a human source, using them against her clients, facilitating dishonesty in the court system, facilitating perjury, and covering up the fact that it had happened, I mean, that is the very definition of corruption.
Graham Ashton and Simon Overland have yet to appear before the Royal Commission. Both declined to appear in this program. Ashton's only public comments so far have come during his regular monthly radio slots with 3AW and ABC.
We were investigating very serious crimes back then that were very serious breaches of the law, and that was the whole raison d'etre behind that whole investigation, was to investigate what were very serious and dangerous crimes at that time that were impacting heavily in the community.
The upper hierarchy of Victoria Police has to take complete responsibility. I mean, the buck stops at the top, clearly, and it went as high as the Chief Commissioner and some Assistant Commissioners. Those who knew and sanctioned what was happening were guilty of terrible breaches of duty and extraordinarily unethical behaviour.
How much responsibility does the current police commissioner, the former assistant commissioner, have to take for the situation the Victoria Police is in?
Well, culture starts at the top. The head of the fish rots first. This is going to be a very, very dark time in the history of Victoria Police Force, and unfortunately it's going to extend over a period of probably 15 to 20 years. And it's going to take some time to rebuild the trust of the community, to bring back ethics into the job.
Are you surprised the Chief Commissioner is still there?
Absolutely. I don't know how he's lasted so long, but public perceptions of the police force has been very damaged by this. And as the High Court has said, it goes to the fundamental foundations of the whole of the criminal justice system. How that's repaired, I don't know, but one would have thought anyone in the hierarchy who sanctioned this should have gone.